Good morning or afternoon for some of you. Thanks so much for taking the time to join our um, today's October CPG Unpacked. My name's Ashlie Winson-Jones. I'm head of business development here at Social Nature, and joining me today are Kevin and Pavel. I'm so excited to have you both. Kevin is heading up Beacon, and I'm going to let him introduce himself because I think there is a ton of interesting aspects of his background that bring this conversation to light. Kevin, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, I'm Kevin Liebrock. I am the product director at Beacon, which is New Hope Network's product discovery platform. So we serve as the platform that hosts all of the products that are at Expo West and New Hope's other show, Newtopia Now. And we serve as a platform for brands to be discovered year round, not just at the shows. Before I was with New Hope and Beacon, I was a buyer at Whole Foods for about 4 or 5 years. And I also started a brand, Bluebird Botanicals, and we went to Expo West and New Hope shows, and we built up our brand and got into a bunch of natural food stores, including Whole Foods, Sprouts, a lot of the big ones, with the help of New Hope. So now I'm kind of bringing it all together and happy to be here with y'all.
Love it. So you can give us the 360 point of view of how to get discovered by retailers.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. And Pavel, thank you much for joining. Please tell us more about Trimona. And I would just so you all know, we were joking about how we are we're still a startup. We're still considering ourselves a startup after 10 years because the challenges never really go away. And so maybe you can share more about who Trimona is for us.
Sure. Thanks for the introduction, Ashley. Hi, everyone. My name is Pavel Kolarov, and I'm the CEO of Trimona Foods. We are the makers of Trimona Bulgarian yogurt, and we are sold at Whole Foods, Natural Channel, as well as many other supermarkets around the country. Actually, you're right. We've had a couple of good years, and we're joking at the company that it's kind of a 10-year-old overnight success because we've been around for about 10 years now, a little more than that. And it is not easy building a brand. It's not easy surviving these turbulent times. It's not easy just, kind of dealing with all the challenges. But at the same time, there are tremendous opportunities for interesting, innovative brands. Obviously, whether it's Social Nature, Beacon, or any other great tools that are out there for smaller companies like ours to break through and get noticed. So yeah, and before that, my experience includes Pepperidge Farm, Campbell's Soup, Kraft, some big companies, IRI as well. At one point in the consulting innovation unit, and I also had my own small consulting practice before I started working with Trimona.
Holy moly. Okay, so just again, 360 approach to getting discovered by buyers. And so I know it sounds so like it's interesting because when we talk about like it's all relative, and when we say I was talking to a client recently who had also come from like P&G, and one of the benefits I find working at Social Nature, and I always think of Social Nature works best for those challenger brands that aren't owned by big box. They're not owned by the P&Gs or Crafts. You folks still really do need to defend your position on shelf and work to get onto more shelves. And so in doing that, what are some of the things that you've learned over the years? And Kevin, I would love, because you obviously represent a bunch of retailers for Beacon, what are buyers looking for these days in a new product launch? And also how I'm assuming that does change quite a bit between like a Whole Foods buyer and a Walmart buyer, but any nuances you can help us understand, I think would really help the audience.
Yeah, for sure. I think one thing that's kind of a non-negotiable now is really slick packaging that stands out. That used to kind of be optional, it feels like, and now it's just kind of expected. And then another thing is a really good brand story. And it doesn't have to be a crazy brand story. It could just be like, hey, we really love hash browns and couldn't find an awesome hash brown, so we made the best one. But something there. And then also, uh, it needs to be something that's approachable and like a reasonable price point and be willing to play the game. Be willing to do promotions, not be like way outside of the range. So those are three things that really stand out to me.
Amazing. Pavel, what about you? What are some feedback um, that Trimona is hearing these days, and also maybe how it's changed? Because I hear that like, buyers are kind of looking for different things, and in this kind of restrained market that is the tariff post-COVID mess that we're in, how are some of those conversations changing with buyers?
Yeah, unlike Kevin, I've been a lot of things, but never a buyer. But in my interactions, I can say that obviously things have changed. I think cost, the ability to a lot of that technical stuff that is one of those, well, we can figure it out later, is becoming a lot more important. Are you competitive on cost? Can you support promotions? Can you support whether it's free fill, slotting, whatever that retailer might require, or ads, or whatever it is. It's not cheap to place your brand out there. And obviously once you move past Whole Foods, then it becomes even more expensive. So there's a lot of these things that you really have to think about carefully before you get to that meeting or that call, and make sure that you go through your checklist and you have answers to any potential questions that buyer might have, some of which may not be um, the ones you're looking for, or comfortable to answer. You really have to get your hands dirty and make sure that you can cover all the bases.
I love that. I saw a LinkedIn post that was circulating actually this week around this, in which, the Coca-Colas of the world were spending 1% of their sales on marketing, but emerging challenger brands were spending upwards of 15%. You comfortable sharing kind of the percentage of what you're allocating to kind of some of those slotting fees and just like TPRs or whatever? Do you have like an overall percentage in mind when you come up with your budgeting?
I can't give you exact percentages, but I can tell you that, between sort of your quarterly OIs or whatever you might be doing with the Keikis and the Unifies of the world,
Yeah.
and your, retail specific promotions, you could easily be looking, 20, 25%, which is no small number. And it's really, for a small brand, it's really not, I mean, it is negotiable, but not to a great degree. You have to. I remember when I first started out, our operations manager, she just took 15% off like everything, and I was like, "Why are we doing this?" She was like, "You will find out that we're probably going to go even beyond that." So, for smaller companies, there's no getting around that. You would have to pay for promotion. You have to pay for all these things because it's just the way it is.
Absolutely. In fact, even it's interesting because like sometimes it's even considered a luxury to be able to even pay for those promotional efforts, i.e., you're not even going to get a shot at an end cap at Walmart unless your sales are at a certain amount. So it is kind of interesting how it's a little counterintuitive. Like, not only do you need the budget, if Walmart gives you that end cap, pay for it. Um, Kevin, and I love this. There's already a question from the audience. Feel free to like pop in with questions as we go. Okay, so a question for you, Kevin. What are the turnoffs from a buyer's perspective when pitching to them?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think what came to mind right away was kind of the selfish brand or the selfish product. Like somebody who's made something basically just for themselves and they're hyped about it because it's theirs. Um, or thinking I've made the next greatest thing. I've made an energy bar that I like, and this is going to be the next greatest energy bar. And I think that the opposite of that that works well is somebody makes something. Somebody makes granola, and they everybody around them who's tried it just keeps asking them for more of it. And they've tested the flavors. They know that kids like it. And then like, I think that extends to that like a product for the people to something that like it's going to do well in the stores. So you're helping the stores do well, and you're coming into the stores, you're checking in on your product, you're in you're in it in terms of wanting them to do well with your product instead of just like growing your own personal brand.
Yeah, for sure. How about for you, Pavel? When you're thinking of your brand story for Trimona, is there like do you, well, I have lots of questions on it, but does your pitch change depending on the retailer? Like, are you more brand story forward, for instance, when you're talking to Sprouts or Whole Foods versus conventional retailers? Or, how does it do you have a strategy around when to say what?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a huge difference between going to meet sort of like a Stop and Shop buyer versus a Whole Foods buyer. Um, in general, and most of your audience probably knows this already, but natural buyers are a little more adventurous. They're a little more sort of, I won't call them risk takers, but in essence they are, because if they take a chance on a brand that's really, not out there at all, they're really kind of putting their reputation on the line if that brand succeeds or not. So I think when it comes to natural buyers, you can, and in the early days, they might be your only shot because you can't go to a Walmart, and you can't go to a Target or whatever it might be. So definitely. And I think with the bigger and more established, the more mainstream the account, probably the more things like data and research starts to play into this. Because then it's going to be maybe a little less brand story and a little more, Nielsen story, if you will. Because, mainstream supermarket buyers, especially, they want to see performance. They want to see rate of sale. They want you to hit the ground running. They really want to see your brand succeed, but at the same time, they want to make sure it's, it kind of fits and does what it needs to do. And very often that's all about like data and fact-based selling.
Amazing. And how hands-on are you with conversations with buyers? Like, how many brokers do you work with? How involved are you in those
Um,
pitches? And yeah, it would be helpful.
I mean, Kevin knows this probably better than I do, but it really depends on the buyer. Some
Yeah.
buyers love to hear from, brand owners. And if we have a chance to speak to the buyer, we do it, every time. If we have a chance to go there and see them physically, we do it every time. But especially post-COVID, I feel like, and some of it has to do with just the volume of conversations and decks and whatnot. I mean, buyers are, in many cases, are clearly overwhelmed, so they have to find a way to sift through all that stuff. But especially post-COVID, many buyers do one of two things: either completely rely on calls and Zoom calls and that kind of stuff. The in-person meeting is not that popular anymore. That's the first thing. And the second thing is they do rely on distributors and brokers to act as gatekeepers very often. So obviously, if you have a good broker, you have a good relationship with the distributor, you can get further ahead. But very often these days, which I find unfortunate, but I understand where they're coming from, is getting face to face with the buyer is less the norm than it used to be like 10 years ago.
Agreed. So if you have the opportunity, absolutely show up. But
by all means, yeah.
Question from the audience, and Kevin, I think this would be interesting for you maybe, is okay. So how would you approach a buyer if you're a startup with basically it's a very early stage, and what kind of promos would you offer aside from, I have a question here, aside from free refills? Like, what are some of the things that you can kind of overly incentivize the buyer to take kindly to you as a startup?
Totally. Yeah, I think one of the tried and true methods is starting in small independent stores, small natural specialty stores. So many brands have been built that way. And going in personally, like as the founder with samples, talking to the person who's ordering for that department, catching them while they're placing an order, and not being annoying, but just being like, hey, check this out. Can you try it? Give them a follow-up call, come back through the stores. And I think one thing that I'd always want to know is like, okay, if I bring your product in, are you going to support it? Um, Promise that you'll do a demo twice a month, for the first few months, and, that you'll be there to help move the product. And then, become like kind of a part of the store community. Like, shop there if you're in the neighborhood, tag them on Instagram, take pictures while you're in the store, give out some free samples to the employees. All that stuff is just like showing you're on the store's team. And I think that gives you a leg up early on. That's how you, like Pavel was saying, that's how you build up that data story early on too. That's something that you can bring to the bigger stores and the higher level buyers.
Yeah, I love that. I think the idea that you have this plan to, what am I going to do today and what am I going to do 6 months from now, 3 years from now to help support this? So like, if I hit these velocity targets, how can we scale up this plan? I think it's a really elevated way of showing the buyer that you have a structure and plan in place and also a budget to fulfill on this plan. And then make sure you actually have the budget to fulfill on this plan. Okay, so what are some of the most overlooked strategies emerging brands have to maintain velocity after launch?
Is that to
You
me or Kevin?
know, I
Sure.
think one thing that came to mind with me is like look at where you end up on the shelf. Make sure that you're going into these stores and checking. Did you make it to the shelf? Is the tag out? Are your promos running? And also, when we're talking about like the smaller stores where you're first starting out, you might have the ability to say, hey, like, I see a spot up here on the shelf one up. Could we kind of move things around a little bit and bring my product closer to eye level? Or, hey, like if you're deciding on your end caps for Halloween, like we've seen other stores do this, and actually we could fit you in here. Maybe we can give you like a case stack deal if you put a case stack here. You have a little bit of ability to kind of negotiate that stuff when you're working with smaller stores early on and kind of work those deals on a personal level with the store level buyers. And I don't think that comes off as annoying. As long as people they know you're in it to sell your product, you're a new brand. It's fine. Like you aren't gonna I think people are scared of really like irritating these buyers, but they want somebody who wants their product to sell. So
That's fair. How about
Yeah,
you?
and if I can just that I think Kevin brings up a good point. Being in stores, merchandising as best you can, creating these relationships, especially early on, is crucial. That's why, and obviously, there's so much you can do yourself, or with a very small team. But especially if you work with some of the smaller distributors, and there's a lot of like regional distributors that are not necessarily KK or UNFI, or one of the big ones. They have relationships with buyers. Capitalize on that as well, or store managers, whatever it might be. I very often say, all right, who are your best accounts? Your best 30 stores. Let's start there and make sure we're on shelf. Make sure we're on promo when we need to be. In fact, if they want a little more, attention, give it to them, because they're going to be the ones that are going to build that velocity for you. By all means, those are especially early on. These are very, very important aspects. And of course, the other thing about kind of where you are on the shelf, that's awesome until you hear that terrible word, planogram, and then they'll be like, "Oh yeah, you're on the top shelf." Because we get this problem all the time. We sell 32-ounce tubs, and in some stores we're on the top shelf, and we have like consumers of a certain age they would call and say, I can't reach it. It's too high. I can't get it. And then we'll call the store or the chain, and they'll be like, yeah, but it's how it is in the planogram. We just can't move it. Um, Probably side note, in certain situation you can, but a lot of stuff is becoming a little more sort of rigid these days. But I guess to sum it up, be in the store, form relationships. I mean, very often a lot of these people, they just don't have the time or the ability to do a lot of these things. So you're actually helping them out. To Kevin's point, you're not irritating, annoying anybody. You can just be part of the selling process. So by
Mhm.
all means, that's a big one.
I find it, I always joke, obviously I built a career in sales and no one wants to say they're in sales, but the truth is everyone's in sales. And so I always joke that these brands that kind of end up on our doorstep, they're often very concerned about defending their position on current shelves. And what I find is, oh, but like let's also um create reasons why a retailer should invest in you. So like, what are some of the questions that we can ask our community members post-trial that helps de-risk a future retailer's investment in you? So like questions like, if it's especially like a peripheral product that's like in between two different categories, like where would you expect to find this product in shelf? What are, how would you use this product in your everyday lifestyle? What are some direct and indirect competitors, and how does this taste compare to those competitors, right? So like then we're creating these insights so that when you're pitching to a buyer, you're making their jobs easier. The fact that you're even trying to make their jobs easier can be the winning point for you. To your point, like we're all just trying to like see these buyers as partners rather than a competition against another brand. So
Totally.
I think, yeah. Question from the audience here is, okay, review syndication. Also, I think there's an interesting theme that's come up quite a bit in the last few webinars here in this importance of D2C. And, you know, is it relevant today? And honestly, one of the things that I've really noticed is that D2C, I think with Instacart and just like a more of an online shopping persona, D2C is alive and well where it hasn't been previously. So how important is having a D2C site, but especially for you, Pavel, where it's obviously perishable and I would never buy yogurt online. So I don't know, is that still like, do you care about reviews and syndication? And do you find that retailers are caring, like, do they care? Like, does Walmart and Target want to see reviews on your product pages? Like, tell me more about that.
Two separate, I guess, topics. One is D2C,
Yes.
and the other one is reviews. First of all, I think just staying with reviews for a second. I think we live in an age where my 10-year-old daughter, we go to a restaurant, well, 11 now, and before we go in, she would open up her phone and check to see what's the Google rating of that restaurant. I was like, I'm your father. If I'm taking you there, it's probably a good one. But no, she wants to see, and if she's anything below like 4.2 or something, oh, that's not a good place. So we live in the era of reviews. I think reviews are very important. Now, if you can go beyond the reviews, beyond the numbers, because like, for instance, one of the things you guys offer on your campaigns is all this qualitative feedback, which I find amazing. And if you can kind of take all that stuff and whether through social nature tools or chat GPT, whatever you might be using, you can actually turn this into something that is very, 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 very helpful. So it's not just the reviews part, but the kind of the research aspect sort of behind it. So I'm a huge believer in this. You might say, well, it's overblown. Doesn't matter. Perception is reality at the end of the day. So I think it's huge. And even if, you know, let's just put it that way, it makes a huge difference. Now, as far as D2C, yes, we are a short shelf life product. We are refrigerated. We can't really kind of go on Amazon and just blow up like that because the supply chain is complicated and expensive. Having said that, we've had quite a bit of success with you know, Whole Foods and sort of the Amazon part that's fulfilled by the local Whole Food stores. That works really well. It's grown tremendously, I think, in the last 2 or 3 years. Now Whole Foods also reports separately, you know, the stuff that's kind of goes direct as well, so you can actually see that stuff. So I'm a huge believer in that. Unfortunately, our brand lends itself a little less to that because of these, you know, kind of obvious restrictions, but that's another thing that's going to grow tremendously. You know, not that we don't know that, but for sure.
Kevin, do you want to speak to the importance of reviews and
DTC?
syndication?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's huge, and especially having syndicated reviews across multiple platforms. That's something everybody's looking for things they haven't tried before. Yeah, and that's something that we're looking forward to integrating into Beacon right now. We actually have gotten a lot of feedback that when people are using Beacon as a discovery tool, they want to be able to see what the reviews for that product are like. And especially, you know, if you're a buyer, having an easy way to see syndicated customer reviews and seeing customer feedback before you decide to bring a product into your store, that's huge.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that I have seen evolved over the years is once upon a time, I don't know if you guys remember this, brands used to have this like line item called SEO, and they were spending, you know, thousands of dollars a month with agencies on said SEO. And if you ever asked an agency what they did to improve a brand's SEO, it was very vague as to, but they were collecting the dollars regardless. The reviews themselves is SEO boosting. Like having a ton of reviews out in the ether will mean that you're on page 1 of Google. And even if it's not your own site, I think just having that content is what makes you pick up, is the pickup that you need. And it's just a natural pickup. So we have found at Social Nature, we have millions of reviews, which means that our SEO is great, but then our clients' SEO is great as a result. So that was actually unintended benefit of social nature that has been really interesting. And then, of course, with Target and Walmart's retailer scorecards and reviews being a major component of that, then of course the rest is history, and now everyone loves reviews and syndication. But even the SEO benefits, I have often said, don't forget about even just that piece alone is important. Amazing. Okay, so okay. Oh, I love it. Okay, a question for you, Pavel. What is the most unhinged thing you did to propel Trimona Foods? By the way, these questions are so funny. I haven't even gone to my planned questions. I'm just we're just having this roundtable conversation with the audience. I love it. Okay, unhinged. Do you have your unhinged moments? You seem very calm and not unhinged to me, but
I don't know about unhinged. I would say probably I didn't start the company. My partner Atanas did, and in the early days he was doing all the usual, like, truck breaks down, he would take over deliveries in his minivan for the rest of the day or whatever, when it's back in the sort of the very early days. Get all these like parking tickets in New York for a day. I think one day he had like more parking tickets than product sold, so he was actually in the negative at the end of the day by like 100, $200. I didn't realize that like a couple days later when he tallied it all up, it looked like that. So I mean, I think that especially in the early days, at the start, you have to think everything. Everything is on the table. I'm not sure unhinged is the right word, but kind of brave and unorthodox, that kind of stuff. Because you want to get noticed. You want to get noticed, and it's getting. I think it's getting even more difficult.
yep. Kevin, any
Yeah.
unhinged moments in your career in CPG?
A couple of cool ones come to mind. So when we got into a bunch of with Bluebird, we got into a bunch of small independents in Northern California, and we went out, we rented a car, and we took a group of people from all the stores out to dinner each night that we were out there, and just gave them samples, talked about the product, and just hung out. That helped a lot. I mean, our stores, those stores started selling more than anybody else because they had a personal connection. We also went around and we worked with coffee bars to put mix our product into coffee bar drinks,
Cool.
and just came in like, hey, try mixing this up. And a couple of them ended up on the coffee bar menu.
Oh, that's cool. I love
Yeah.
that, like, food service aspect of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Um, okay, Elijah wants to know, why is it so hard historically for minority-owned food and beverage brands to get placement in retail? And my question is, a follow-up question to that is, I always thought that retailers typically had dedicated shelf space to minority-owned brands. Is that the case for most retailers these days? Kevin?
I know it's something that we actually on Beacon, if you want to find minority-owned products, you can go to Beacon and sort our entire catalog by minority-owned. And that's also a filter that we see used a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So we're seeing that being used. I think that buyers have a desire for it.
Yeah, that's my sense too. I know that there are even some services out there specifically for minority-owned food brands.
All the
Elijah,
big, I think all the big retailers, starting with Target, used to have specific programs. And there's a whole bunch of case studies out there online. You can go find them. The problem is, without getting any political, that I feel that a lot of that stuff is, if it's not completely going away, then it's definitely getting more difficult.
yeah. Also, the other thing that I have noticed is that that shelf space does seem to go to a fairly established minority-owned brands. So to say that it's like helping out the emerging brand startup that's also minority owned could also be a bit of a challenge. So like there
Yeah.
are kind of like some go-to established brands that happen to be minority owned that I have seen in those sections, which doesn't really help. I don't think that was the intention when that distribution was set aside. So I with you, it's challenging. So on that note, just because is it something that if you're minority owned, do you think it should be kind of like part of your first foot forward in a approach to buyers, like in kind of like your brand story?
I think so. I mean, I think as a buyer, the last thing that I wanted was another product that came from like a corporate workshop. And if there's a story and a person behind it and you want to see that person be successful, that's really meaningful.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, some questions on just like fundamentals on getting discovered by retail, because I think that I don't want to end the conversation without just like some kind of like general, like foundational knowledge of like, okay, one of the things that I find in the thousands of discovery calls I've had over brands is just a better understanding of what to do when. Like, okay, like what is considered a startup and what are some of your goals as a startup? And then what could be considered an emerging brand, set of goals. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit. Just like and what's kind of natural stepping stones to the next step, because I've actually seen a lot of brands make the mistake of saying yes to a PO from Walmart way too early. They end up getting delisted and then their confidence is crushed, but more importantly 200K is in the dumpster fire. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that, like how, what are some stepping stones to go from 0 to 60? Any advice on that front?
All right, I'll start. By the way, if you get that PO from Walmart, you've done something good.
That's
Just so that you
true.
know, you've done
True.
something good for sure. Not an easy one to get. I would say that you basically have to start with, you know, it sounds cliche, but what's a good fit for you? Obviously we talk about natural, we talk about sort of upscale brands, and most would start with sort of the independents, but also eventually sort of your Whole Foods and Sprouts and your fresh markets and that kind of stuff. But it doesn't have to necessarily be that. I feel that more often than not, sometimes, kind of starting at a region might be sort of the smarter thing to do because it's more manageable. To Kevin's point, you can actually go see the buyers, and it doesn't matter if it's a buyer at a giant or a buyer at like the local indie shop. It's much more manageable. It's much more, it's no matter what you've done in your past life, you're still learning as a brand, and those learnings are something you can apply going forward. I don't think there's sort of an inflection point from being a startup to being a sort of established brand. You're always a startup. I mean, I always think we're going to be a startup no matter how big we are, because you always think a little paranoid. But at the same time, obviously, the more established you become, probably the more demands on your brand. You can't get away with like not doing this or not doing that. They'll be like, no, we see you have market share. So there are some expectations that come with it, to do programs, to do this, to do that, and all that kind of stuff. So, you kind of grow with the business essentially, but just don't lose focus of, who your customers are, what's the best fit in terms of, retail, and leverage all these relationships that you build over the years.
Yeah, I love that. Kevin, any advice on?
Yeah, for kind of the phased approach, I love the idea of focusing on a region. And I think the best place to start is right around you, It's if you're in Boulder, try to get into all of the little stores that would be a fit in Boulder and then kind of move out from there. Then maybe go after Denver. And then, you land in, say you get placement in a region of a bigger chain like Whole Foods. Make sure that you're really, really dedicated to that. Don't just say, okay, now I'm in Whole Foods, let's get into the next one, or let's go to the bigger region. Make sure that you're really supporting it. And you're going into the stores and you're seeing, you're getting feedback. You're making sure the product's moving off the shelf. And also realize that like in that initial expansion phase, like really, really listen to the feedback. If there's anything off with the product, if there's anything off with the labeling, the way that it stands up on the shelf, the way that the color appears in the store lighting, like you have that period to make changes before you get the PO for the entire country of Kroger. So I think recognize that as you're starting up and getting into stores, like any feedback that you're getting early on is just going to be magnified. So be willing to change, be willing to make little tweaks. That's what we did. That worked for us.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Marketing dollars in your own backyard is your ROI on your marketing dollars in your own backyard is going to be far better than that of across the country. And it's interesting because you always think of brands, the most successful brands do tend to be based in like a cool,
Yeah.
LA, New York, and then you grow from there. But I have had brands who say, but I'm not based in LA and New York. Now what? Should I go into LA and New York? I was like, I don't think you're ready for LA and New York. Like the good news is your own backyard, if you're not in a hot spot, then it's not particularly competitive. So to your point, own the space, own your regions, and then use that as a stepping stone to go beyond. You'll just have a much better result on your marketing budget because it's probably early days at that point too. Cool. I mean, this has been such a juicy conversation. I feel like I'm going to invite the audience to connect with you guys both because I cannot keep up with the questions that keep getting dropped in the chat box. So how about this? How about we last with some like, I know that we're all very passionate about removing barriers for emerging brands to win. I know, Pavel, even though you've been doing this for 10 years, you're still very generous with your time with emerging brands. So any last advice before we let everyone go on with the rest of their day?
I mean, just kind of staying with I guess the theme is, breaking into retail, trying to, stand out in any different way. I would say that something that I've sort of learned over the years is spend a little more time trying to figure out where you're going. Like for instance, if it's a specific retail chain you have a meeting with, try to learn as much as you can about the chain. Go to the stores, take pictures, learn about the buyer if you can. You see what makes them tick, whether it's the EDLP, whether they're high-low, what is it they really like. See if what they like is what you're willing to do also, because if you know they're gonna have like an ad program for like 20 grand, maybe that's not for you. You know what I mean? So, and very often, and I've done the same mistake, early on, you're kind of desperate to get anything. And sometimes you get in yourself into situations which are not great financially or otherwise. So, kind of take a step back, prepare very well, think about if it's what you want to do and if you can really kind of sustain it before you jump in. Because once you jump in, it becomes messy. So it's good to think it through before you make that big, huge first step.
Amazing. Agreed. Kevin, what do you
Yeah.
think?
I think just being a really good company, treating your employees really well, acting, knowing that you're a steward for your brand everywhere you go, being really fair with all your business partners, and just having kind of a mission and sticking to it. I think acknowledge that you're always building that up, and that's something that'll stick with your brand for a long time.
I would say my advice to folks, some of the things that I'm most proud of is funny enough, I kicked myself off of the Social Natures leadership team this year because I really wanted to focus on kind of meeting brands where they were and basically just like selling individually to brands and really understanding like what was happening with the market with the tariffs and whatnot. And that was so illuminating and what was actually going on in this space and just going to all the trade shows and hearing what brands had to say from themselves. It was so it was just like a wake up call of being like, oh, this is what everyone needs to do and stay close to. Even 11 years into business, when you stop doing that and you're not able to like hear from your customers yourselves, it's really tricky to stay rooted into like what is going well and maybe what's not going so well. So that is my advice to everyone. But thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it. Excited to kind of continue the conversation offline with everyone individually. Yeah, like I said, I told the audience to connect with you guys both on LinkedIn, but we'll also send this out to everyone via email. Yeah, thanks for the time.